أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان. والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجن من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يسأله من في السماوات والأرض كل يوم هو في شأن فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. سنفرغ لكم أيها الثقلان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض فانفذوا لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يرسل عليكما شواظ من نار ونحاس فلا تنتصران فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. فإذا انشقت السماء فكانت وردة كالدهان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. فيومئذ لا يسأل عن ذنبه إنس ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يعرف المجرمون بسيماهم فيؤخذ بالنواصي والأقدام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. هذه جهنم التي يكذب بها المجرمون يطوفون بينها وبين حميم آن فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ولمن خاف مقام ربه جنتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ذواتا أفنان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما عينان تجريان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما من كل فاكهة زوجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان متكئين على فرش بطائنها من استبرق وجنى الجنتين دان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهن قاصرات الطرف لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان كأنهن الياقوت والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ومن دونهما جنتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مدهامتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما عينان نضاختان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما فاكهة والنخل ورمان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهن خيرات حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان حور مقصورات في الخيام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان متكئين على رفرف خضر وعبقري حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان تبارك اسم ربك ذا الجلال والإكرام صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. صلوا على النبي أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح، هيا على الفلاح، هيا على خير العمل، هيا على خير العمل. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله، وأشهد أن عليا حجة الله صلوات وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير عمل، حي على خير عمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه، إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك
محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. ہے سلام اس پہ جو کہتی تھی میرے ویر حسین خاک میں کس نے ملا دی تیری تصویر حسین تم تو پردیس میں سر اپنا کٹا کر سوئے ننگے سر آئی ہے مجرے کوئے ہمشیر حسین کیا عبادت کا تمہیں شوق تھا اللہ اللہ تاہ شمشیر بھی جاری رہی تکبیر حسین اما زہرا کا جنازہ تو اٹھا تھا شب کو مجھ کو بلوے میں لیے جاتے ہیں بے پیر حسین تیرے لاشے کو کفن بینا ملا میرے اخی سر پہ چادر بھی نہیں کیا کروں تدبیر حسین تازیان تیرے بچوں کو لگاتے ہیں لعین کس گناہ کیے ہمیں دیتے ہیں تعزیر حسین شام کو جاتی ہوں میں تم کو خدا کو سونپا میرے مظلوم
أخي خشت شمشیر حسین خاک میں کس نے ملا دی تیری تصویر حسین صلوا علی النبی
اللهم صل على
محمد وآل محمد فاتحة.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sayyid Hasan, Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatih is requested for all the names listed on the screen in Kul Arwahil Mu'mineen wal Mu'minat, Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayat Ma Yajibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is ill here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibul mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Now let us invite Sayyid to come forward and recite tonight's Majlis par Muhammad wa ali Muhammad Salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين للتراب بمقدمه الفدا ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد. مؤمنين مؤمنات, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we are commemorating what's become recently known as Yawme-Gham wal-Inhidam, the day of Gham, sorrow, grief, and Inhidam, destruction. We commemorate the razing, the destruction and demolition of the graves within Jannatul Baqi in Medina. Normally, our association, or the graves that are most important to us as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, are the graves of the Imams. But as most of us know, that it wasn't just 4 graves that were destroyed. There were graves of many other individuals within Jannatul Baqi that were also destroyed by this illegitimate Al Saud family. The parents of Rasulullah, Abdullah and Amina, were destroyed. His uncles Abbas and Hamza, their graves were destroyed. The infant son, Ibrahim ibn Muhammad, was destroyed. Many of the famous companions, like Uthman ibn Mad'un, Malik ibn Anas, and Uthman ibn Affan, all these graves were also destroyed. But for us, the most tragic part, of course, all the destruction is tragic, but the ones that really destroy us, the ones that really break our hearts, are the 4 graves of the 4 Imams that are there that have been destroyed. Namely, the 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 6th Imam, alayhimu salatu wa salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So normally, when we commemorate this night, we talk about Jannatul Baqi or something related to that. I wanted to shift gears actually and talk about something that's related, but you might think it's indirect, but for me, I think it's very direct and contemporary. When it comes to the concept or the idea, the tragedy of what happened with this destruction in Al-Baqi, normally the followers of Ahlul Bayt, Shi'as, are the ones who are staunchly coming out. Sometimes they go in front of the Saudi embassy, they protest over there. In Hijaz itself, many of the followers of Ahlul Bayt, they come out and they protest over there. There are majalis being held in various Islamic centers like this, right, just to commemorate this tragedy. So normally in Baqi, there's this sort of activism, right, of how do we get involved? A lot of people think about what is it that we can do in order to force the Saudi family to rebuild the graves at Al-Baqi. So the idea that I want to talk about is Islamic activism. So it's clearly related to the concept of Jannatul Baqi and the rebuilding of those graves. But right now, although this night is used to commemorate what happened at Al-Baqi, if we were to think about international relations right now, although we don't like thinking about the Al Saud normally, they're not really the first priority on our mind. If you look in social media, if you're following the news, right now it's the plight, the tragedy of what's happening to the Palestinians, which is on everybody's mind. So what I wanted to talk to everybody about tonight is the idea of Islamic activism through looking at Jannatul Baqi, but specifically how we can apply it to contemporary issues and problems like activism regarding the plight in Palestine and to support Palestinians. Now, there's a lot of different causes we could talk about, of course, right? Kashmir, in Syria, there are places in Africa. All over the world, there's obviously people who are being oppressed and punished. Obviously, one of the most severe punishments and occupations is, of course, in Palestine. That's usually why the whole world, especially the Muslims, whether Sunni or Shia, divide and focus all of their attention to Palestine primarily. Right? There's many reasons for why that's the case. But there's 3 things tonight that I want to talk about in regards to this issue, because people have been coming up to me asking me about this issue about Palestine in general. On social media, people have been talking about it. So I thought that in the spirit of this activism that we normally show for Al-Baqi, that also we want to figure out and answer some questions regarding supporting Palestine and the Palestinians, I thought that let's talk about the concept of Islamic activism itself. So there's 3 points that I want to talk about tonight. The first is, when we're talking about, people talk about activism, or specifically as Muslims, we talk about Islamic activism. Now, what does it mean to say that there is a such thing as Islamic activism? Is there even a such thing? Or are we just throwing the word Islamic in front of the word activism, right, uselessly? So what does it mean for something to be Islamic activism? The second question is there only one true way to be an Islamic activist? Meaning, there's one thing that all of us should be doing right now, whether it's to support the cause of rebuilding Jannatul Baqi, whether it's to support the Palestinians, whether it's to support those who are being oppressed in the Muslims in China, wherever it is. Is there only one way where we should be doing this and we all should be united and that's it? And everybody else is wrong? Or is there a different answer? And the third question is, how can we answer this second question about Islamic activism the right way? How do we understand and try to approach this question from the lives and the examples of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam? So this will be our discussion tonight. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. What is Islamic activism? Obviously, we're going to have two groups of Muslims in regards to the cause of the Palestinians. One group will say that, look, we're just standing for this cause because, it's the right thing to do. Every human being who has a heart, they're going to stand with them. Okay. Others say, look, it needs to be Islamic in nature. It needs to be Islamic activism, not just any sort of activism. Which means that if we're saying that there's Islamic activism, then that means there should be different types of activism as well. And we have to pick the one that's Islamic. So there's two groups of Muslims like this. So we need to, we have to figure out first, what does it mean for something to be Islamic in the first place? When we say Islamic X, Islamic Y, Islamic Z, what does that mean? Now, normally we use the term very loosely, right? We just toss out the word Islamic for a lot of different things. Think about the idea of an Islamic country. What does that mean? That this country is an Islamic country. What does it mean when we say that a center is an Islamic center? What does it mean when we say we have an Islamic school versus a non-Islamic or un-Islamic school? So those are normally the ways that we use it, and we can understand that. And there are also a lot of other subtopics that would get much more complicated when we have, let's say, banking versus Islamic banking. What does that really mean? So when we talk about all this first category, it's obvious that, I can understand a little bit about how Islam can be introduced into those ideas. Islamic country, Islamic center, Islamic school, Islamic banking, etc. But then there are clear cases where if somebody just threw the word Islamic in front of it, it wouldn't make sense, right? Like if somebody said Islamic casino, like I'm building an Islamic casino, obviously that doesn't make any sense. We know that obviously, intuitively, because we know gambling's haram. So there's no way that somebody can make an Islamic casino. You can, have the word Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim written outside the doors. You can have a masjid inside and have, the prayer hall ready for everybody. You can serve halal food. You can't call it an Islamic casino. By no means, right? It's not going to happen. So that should be obvious. There are certain things you just can't throw the word Islamic in front of. Now, how then can we throw the word Islamic in front of something? You see, let's answer that first group first, right? The first group that says, look, we don't need to use the word Islamic for activism. In fact, the word Islamic can't come in front of everything. In the Islamic world right now, or in the Muslim world, in the Hawza, they debate these things like, are there Islamic sciences? Meaning Islamic banking, Islamic engineering, Islamic physics. These are things that are contested, debated right now. Many of you may have been following the debates. Islamic medicine, is that something that exists or not? So when we use the word Islamic, usually the idea is that every single thing that we're doing, every facet, has to be sourced in and through Islam. If we're trying to come with a conclusion, we have to make sure that we reach that through the Islamic sources. Namely, for us, the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. Now some might say, okay, well, how do we know that this is going to apply for everything? Okay, maybe we can understand an Islamic center. Okay, that's obvious, maybe. Islamic country, maybe we can understand that. But how do we understand it for other things like Islamic activism? What if somebody says, no, the word Islam doesn't apply everywhere? Well, the evidence that our ulama will give, there's many different ayat in the Quran and many ahadith. I just want to give a part for one of the surahs and one of the ayat that's used. So this is normally used, one of the evidences is from Surah Al-Nahl, right? Surah 16, ayah number 89. And I apologize, I didn't send this ahead of time, otherwise it would be displayed on the screen. Over here, I'm just going to the end part of it. That's all that we're dealing with right now. Where over there, Allah says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wa nazzalna 'alayka al-kitab tibyanan likulli shay." And we sent upon you, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We sent down to you or upon you the book, right? Al-Kitab, meaning the Quran, which is what? Tibyanan likulli shay. It's going to explain and clarify kulli shay, every single thing. So, and then of course the ayah continues, وَهُدًى وَرَحْمَةً وَبُشْرَى لِلْمُسْلِمِينَ. So it's going to guide us to everything. It's going to explain everything that we need in our lives. Huda, meaning it's hidayat. It'll guide us for all the things. وَرَحْمَةً. It's going to be a mercy for us. Bushra, it'll give us the good news for Muslimin, for anybody who submits to Islam. So for anybody who is saying that I'm a Muslim, if you're saying you're a Muslim, then Allah is saying, look, I sent down a Quran through the Prophet, and this Quran, if we're connecting it with the Ahlul Bayt, is going to have the explanations for every single thing that you need in life. Meaning, yes, Islamic banking should be there. Islamic engineering will be there. Islamic chemistry will be there. Islamic activism will be there too. Every single thing that we need in order to organize our lives must be in the Quran, according to the Quran itself, and of course explained through the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wasalam. This is the evidence that normally our ulama use to say that yes, the word Islam or Islamic should be attached to most things, well, except for casino and maybe some other things that are obvious. But to most other general sciences, these kind of things can be attached. So the short answer is there a such thing as Islamic activism? Yes. How? If we can source our method, our approach, the goals and conclusions of our activism within the Quran and through the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, then that's something that we can start calling Islamic activism. Now the question will be, okay, if that's the case, is there only one true, real way to be an Islamic activist? This is our second question. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay, so let's say we all agree, fine. There is something called Islamic activism, and we all as Muslims are striving to be Islamic activists. Okay, well, is there one proper way? Is there a best way and everything else is falsehood, everything else is wrong, everything else is evil? If you don't do it this way, that means you support the zalimeen. You know, that's how sometimes people speak, right? Choose this way, otherwise you're on the side of falsehood. Say, look, okay, we have one Quran clearly. We have 14 ma'asumin. If that's the case, shouldn't there be only one idea, one true path and perspective, and everything else be false? Normally, this is the idea that you and I have in our minds, right? But when we bring this, or we have this idea and thought, we don't relate it to Islamic activism. In fact, we bring it to something even more, I don't want to say important, but something that's usually we deal with more in our day-to-day lives, in fiqh or in taqleed. We say, look, it doesn't make sense. One Quran, the same 14 ma'asumin that all Shias are following, why is it that our maraji', may Allah bless and protect all of them, why is it that they have different conclusions then? Why does one marja', for example, say that chess, it's haram to play? Why does one marja' say, no, chess is okay as long as you don't gamble? Some marja' say you can play. Why are there other marja' who say, look, you can't play, you can't even watch somebody playing, that's also haram. If it's the same Quran and the same ma'asumin that we all believe in, how can they come to different conclusions? It doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Well, the analogy that I'm sure many of you who have thought about or asked other ulama about this question, they usually give an analogy from the medical world. Right? They say, look, right now, let's take a simple medical example regarding COVID. Are there differences of opinion regarding all the different facets of COVID? Absolutely, right? Right now, if you ask somebody, hey, if you ask a doctor, any doctor, do the research, which vaccine should I take? Some will tell you Moderna's the best. Some will say Pfizer's the best. Some might even say J&J, although not too many, but some may recommend J&J for various reasons. So they're all doctors. They've all studied. Why are they giving different opinions? Shouldn't it be the same thing? Isn't it the same human body and the same COVID virus we're all dealing with? Why are they making different conclusions? You ask them again, okay, people who are vaccinated, should they wear face masks or not? Again, you're going to get different answers. Right now, the CDC and a good body of medical experts, they're arguing right now, right? Because the CDC has declared that they're loosening all these face mask restrictions. They're saying it's fine. Whereas the medical world, a lot of them are coming out saying, no, we should not do that yet because it could cause another surge. There's not enough people vaccinated, etc. They have their reasons. So you have a whole body on one side saying it's okay, relax the restrictions. Another body, all again, talking about the same exact stuff, coming to differences of opinion. If they're all medical experts, same human body that we all have, I think we all have, right, the same human body, generally speaking. Some a little bigger, some a little skinnier, but the same body, same digestive, circulatory system, we're all there, same thing. They have the same evidence in front of them too in terms of medical research and literature. It's all there. How are they coming to all these different conclusions? Now, we know that people, sometimes if they have the same evidence, it doesn't automatically mean that they're going to have the same conclusions. Just because we have the same proofs or ideas in front of us doesn't mean that we're going to reach the same conclusions. But we have to remember that we all have the same goal and the same values in mind. For medical experts, it's obviously that they want everybody to be safe. They want everybody to be healthy. How we get there is going to be different. In the political world, right? We have Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, independents, everybody arguing about, gun rights and again, what to do about face masks and freedom and all this stuff. But the same goals are in mind. They want people to be protected. They want people to be healthy. People like freedom and liberty and economic prosperity. They want the same things. We just disagree on how to get there. Right? The goals, the values are the same, but the way that we're getting there and understanding the evidence is different. The same thing is happening with the maraji or any alim in that sense. Yes, they might be prone to mistakes. There might be biases and lapses in judgment, but the goal is the same. The values are the same, and based on their various approaches and methods, they may come to different conclusions, and that's not a negative thing. That's actually showing us the depth, the breadth, and the amazing infinite ocean of knowledge that's available to us when we look at the Quran and we look at the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhimu salatu wassalam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So we shouldn't have a problem and be upset or uptight or stressed out when we see differences of opinion. It's normal. That's going to happen. Now, some of you might respond and say, Hasan, we can understand that for maraji, for ulama, for speakers, for doctors. Why? Because they're fallible. They're prone to mistakes. They can't understand the evidence perfectly. But let's say we had the imam of the time right here, and he was in charge of everything. He would make one conclusion about what to do with COVID, for example. Or if we had lived during the time of the ma'sumin, they would give one ruling, one hukum, and that's it. We would have to follow it. So there's no differences of opinion there, right? So we need to use the example of the Ahlul Bayt, not people that are prone to mistakes or biases or judgments and lapses in judgment and things like that. We as followers of the Ahlul Bayt need to use the role models, the Ahlul Bayt. Let's see. Didn't they all make the same exact decisions and conclusions? We know they have the same goals, same values. So didn't they have the same approaches as well? Now I think the answer should be very obvious, shouldn't it? Do we see the exact same approaches with all the ma'sumin? Taking a look at the lives spread out through these hundreds of years that they were alive, all 14 ma'sumin. That's not considering the other, 123,999 prophets, right? Just the 14 ma'sumin. Where, regarding all of the issues, specifically the zalimeen, the oppressors that they faced, did every single ma'asum have the exact same method, the exact same approach in mind? Did they all do the exact same thing? So this now brings us to our third question. What can we understand and implement regarding Islamic activism from the lives of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhimu salatu wassalam? Salawat. It's good that we want to source things from the Ahlul Bayt. That's what a Shia should be doing. The problem sometimes is that we become so focused on them, we become hyper-focused, and we get this tunnel vision. What do I mean? Again, going back to the issue of Palestine. If you look right now on social media, on the different speakers and scholars who are talking about how to support Palestinians and the Palestinian cause, how to stand up against this Zionist occupying aggression. Normally, the example they give, the analogy they give is what? Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Karbala. We have to stand against Yazid. This is the sort of rhetoric that's being used. Now, are they right? Are they wrong? Well, of course, the minute somebody mentions Imam Hussein, they mention Bibi Zainab, they mention Yazid, everybody gets kind of triggered, right? We don't want to be opposing Imam Hussein. So it's a nice trick. But why is it that whenever these political discussions happen, or any discussion for that matter, why is it that Shias only want to focus on one Imam? Have you forgotten 13 other ma'sumin? Don't you know that we have hundreds of years of research and the different life examples of the ma'sumin? Why is it every single time there's an issue, everybody wants to jump to a single Imam, like Imam Hussein alayhi salam, or Imam Ali alayhi salam? They only focus on one. Look, if we want to try to figure out what our duty is as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, it's disingenuous, it's non-academic, it's ignorant and arrogant of us to just grab one simple small example from one imam and say that that's the thing that we need to do right here and right now. A proper researcher, scholar, thinker would look at the lives of all of the Ahlul Bayt, then by looking at them figure out which one makes sense for our time, which one makes sense for our place. This time and place that we are in right now seems to be like the time of the 5th Imam, or maybe it seems like the time of the 9th Imam, or maybe it doesn't seem like the time of any of the Imams, maybe it's very close to the time of Rasulullah, right? This is possible. And we can have that discussion, and we should be having that discussion. But that requires us to have that background, that full history, and be able to analyze all the different ways that the Ma'asumeen live their lives. Because right now, if we're talking about Islamic activism, people, what are they saying? If you're not doing X, Y, Z, if you don't say this or do this, if you don't come to protests against the Zionist forces, then you're like Yazid. You're like a silent person in Karbala. Why are you playing games with the history like this? How could you say something like that? Why would you say then, when the other Ma'asumeen didn't stand up, for example, against the Zalameen of their times, would you say that they are inactive, that they support the Zalameen, na'udhu billah? Are you saying the only active Imam is Imam Hussein alayhi salam? Is that what you're saying? Because by the rhetoric you're using, that's what you seem to be implying. When clearly no Shia would ever say that only one Imam was active and all 13 other Ma'asumeen, they were inactive. Every single Ma'asum was active, but according to their time and their place, according to the circumstances that they were dealing with, according to the Shias that were around them, according to the empire that they were living in. All of these factors, based on the wisdom, the ilm al-ghayb that Allah had given them, they acted accordingly. And everybody, I think we do know that. But what we get lost in sometimes is because we specifically want to do one thing in terms of activism, we put that on a pedestal and we insult and cut down everybody else's style that's available. So what I want to talk about is this. We know that there are different methods that we can use. And we can sit there and, again, we don't have time. We could analyze the lives of each and every single Ma'asum and see how they were active multiple times in their lives. We can't do that. We don't have the time. So what I'd like to do then instead is this. Since we are commemorating the destruction of Al-Baqi, I want to focus on the 4 Imams' graves. These 4 Imams, their graves were destroyed. Let's rebuild their legacy by looking at the various examples of activism that they implemented in their lives. And just to show us that activism doesn't always have to be us being out somewhere. A simple narration that all of us are familiar with, we've all heard before, and it's coming from the 7th Imam alayhi salam, who narrates from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where he had said, and in a sense perhaps laid us a principle right in the beginning about different types of activism, where he is reported to have said, Al-Hasan wal-Hussein imaman. Imam Hasan and Imam Hussein, they are both imams. Qaman o qa'dan. Whether they're standing or sitting, which normally our ulama use this as an analogy, whether they are actually actively fighting, for example, or they are fighting sort of behind the scenes, or literally sitting down. وَسَيِّدَ شَبَابِ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ. So both of them are still Sayyid Shabab Ahl al-Jannah. They're still the masters of the youth of paradise. Whether they are taking what we think is an active role by fighting, for example, or they're taking a different type of active role, which is behind the scenes. Now let's look at the example of these 4 Imams and how they left us 4 various principles, basic principles in Islamic activism. So let's first start with the 2nd Imam. So normally when we think about Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam, we think about peace. It's like, the example there is peace. Sometimes you have to have peace. Now this again is a selective reading of the history of Imam Hasan. When he first started out, right, the beginning part of his imamah was not peace. The first thing that he did is to continue to wage the war that his father, Imam Ali alayhi salam, had waged against Muawiyah. In fact, he wanted to engage in even a stronger war. Most of us don't know this because we don't, unfortunately, we don't know our history very well. We love the Imams, but we don't know their history. One of the first things that Imam Hasan alayhi salam did was to increase the military pay, the stipend that soldiers were given. Because he saw that, look, his father had been betrayed constantly by his own people, his own soldiers. He said, I need to get people back into the army in order to fight Muawiyah. So one of the best ways, unfortunately, there's 2 things that people love, food and money, right? That's how we get people to the center, right? We offer them food. Imagine now in every niyaz bag, instead of food, there was, a $20 bill. Imagine how much, we'd increase participation, right? These are the two things that get people. So what does Imam Hasan do? He needs soldiers, he needs supporters, so he increases the military budget. He tries to get people back into the army. Why? Because he knows he has to fight against Muawiyah, the zalim, the fasiq of that time. So the main principle there was war against the oppressor, not peace. But as we know, again, because we know our history, as time went on, he started to lose supporters. Even his own generals and commanders betrayed him. They fell prey to propaganda from Muawiyah. Muawiyah would bribe them so they would leave the army or they would stay silent. There was a media propaganda campaign against Imam Hasan. So slowly and slowly, he lost support until we see that people within his army tried to assassinate him, and then he realized that, look, Imam realized, I can't engage in active war anymore. Why? Because there's no Shias. There's no Muslims. There's no supporters here. What's the point in engaging in war like this? It's a losing battle. That's when he said, as a last resort, then he signed the treaty with Muawiyah. But the treaty wasn't just out of nowhere, right? They had the conditions there because he knew that Muawiyah would end up breaking them, right? He had that wisdom to know what type of treaty to sign in order to get Muawiyah to break it later on and to set the stage for his brother Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And this is the same principle that had been set by Imam Ali alayhi salam. He was fighting until he realized that he doesn't have support. Until then he had to backtrack. Even after Saqifa, we know from the history, Imam Ali says that I'm ready to take back my khilafah, my right, but I need supporters. And when they didn't show up to support him, as he had asked them to at Fajr time, he said, what am I going to do? I can't do this. We need to make sure we have a support system ready before we move forward with any sort of active movements. So when people talk about we must go out, we have to protest, you have to do this and this for Palestinians, maybe. Or maybe another person might say, look, I want to build supporters first. I want to build up a base before we actively go out and do something in the streets. This might be an approach that somebody takes. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now we jump to the next Imam, our fourth Imam, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Many view him as the spiritual Imam, right? Who wasn't actively out engaging in war. What he did during his time, as far as most of us, what we understand, is the focus was on dua and ziyarat and all of the spiritual sort of things that we think about. When we think of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, the first thing is Sahifa Sajjadiyah. That's what we think about. Imagine if within our lives, as followers of Ahlul Bayt, we didn't have that masterpiece in our lives. Now, every single time, there's all these beautiful du'as that are there, but, sometimes we think that we underestimate the value of du'as, right? Some people right now, in terms of, again, supporting the Palestinians, they say, look, right now, I don't come to the protests, I don't post anything, but I make du'a for them. I make du'a for the Palestinian cause. I make du'a against the Zionist occupation forces. And some people say that's not enough, you have to do more. What do you mean that's not enough? Sometimes that spiritual connection is required, right? Now I'm not saying this and nothing else, but I'm saying that is one approach that somebody could choose for themselves. It's a valid approach. We discount the spiritual realm altogether. Even when it comes to the various du'as that Imam has passed down in Sahifa Sajjadiyah, even there, we don't look carefully about what the Imam's trying to teach us. Many of us know that within every single dua, there are hidden messages that Imam was sending to the Shias as well. And about how to engage in active warfare with the various zalimeen that existed during that time. And if we had time, I'd go through the various different du'as that are there. There's there's so much information. Even in one of the du'as that's there, that's the du'a against the zalimeen. Whenever somebody's confronted with zulm and zalimeen, the Imam has a du'a for that. And I didn't note down the number, so I can't tell you that. But if you look in Sahifa, you can go see. So it's again short, but there's various different pieces. Now again, when we're looking at this, if somebody just reflects on this, they'll see that when the Imam is speaking out or making dua against zulm and zalimeen, it's not just that may Allah destroy oppressors and that's it. May Allah support the madhlumeen and that's it. The Imam has various different stages in how we're supposed to combat zulm. So for example, one part he says, وَخُذْ ظَالِمِي وَعُدُوِّي عَنْ ظُلْمِي بِقُوَّتِكَ. Keep my wrongdoing enemy from wrongdoing me through your strength, through your quwwah. So first thing is, Allah, don't let them harm me. So there has to be that personal nature there that Allah, I don't want these oppressors to affect me. That's one thing. In another place, he continues, وَأَعِدْنِي عَلَيْهِ عُدْوَى حَاضِرَةً تَكُونَ مِنْ غَيْذِي بِهِ شِفَاءً وَمِنْ حَنَقِي عَلَيْهِ وَفَاءً. And help me and assist me with immediate assistance. What kind of assistance? Now, again, somebody might think, before reading the full thing, assistance in fighting the oppressors. But what does he say? Assist me and help me from the ghayth bihi shifa. Meaning, I have this rage inside of me against the oppressors. Ya Allah, help me heal that rage. Because we know that sometimes that rage is necessary, but sometimes that rage takes us over. And we become way too emotional, and we put up these social media posts, or we speak to other individuals who are on our same side, but might have a difference of opinion, and we start attacking them instead. So Allah, help me control my rage and make me focus it towards the one who deserves my rage. Don't let that rage attack me, right? And redeem my fury towards him. Let me focus my fury against the zalimeen and not towards my own people, and not towards myself too. He continues, وَصِلْ دُعَائِ بِالْإِجَابَةِ. Join my dua, the way I'm supplicating, I'm asking you, make sure you connect it with ijabah. Make sure you answer it as well, Allah. I want you to be able to answer this. I don't want it just to feel good. I want you to actually make this happen. وَقْرِنْ شِكَايَتِي بِالتَّغْيِيرِ. And connect my shikaya with taghyir. When I'm complaining to you, I don't want it to just be a complaint out of nowhere. I want you to make taghyir and change as well. You see how Imam is taking care of every single point of this. He continues in another part. وَإِنْ كَانَتِ الْخَيْرَ لِي عِنْدَكَ فِي تَأْخِيرِ الْأَخْذِ وَتَرْكِ الْإِنْتِقَامِ مِمَّنْ ظَلَمَنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ الْفَضْلِ وَمَجْمَعِ الْخَصْمِ. And also, get me ready. If it's khair for me, if that khair is in you doing ta'khir and delaying their punishment of the zalimeen. If there's khair in extending the reign of the zalimeen, help me understand that. A lot of us think that we know what's best for the Palestinians, meaning this has to happen now and that's it. The Imam here seems to be implying that, hey, we need to make sure our aqa'id and our beliefs are in the right place. Don't just pray for a conclusion that you like. Pray for a conclusion that Allah knows is khair. Keep your own aqidah intact and don't deviate with your own ideas. Maybe because of certain issues that only Allah knows, maybe the occupation by the Zionists, maybe the oppression that's happening there, it's best that it continues for maybe another 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, who knows? We don't know what khair lies there. Now, again, we'll still pray for the occupation to end, definitely. But at the same time, we have to hold off on keeping our own ideas about what the conclusion should be. Even in the end, he says, even if that means that you refrain, Allah, you hold your intiqam, your vengeance, until Yawm al-Qiyamah. If that's what that means, then if that's khair, then help me control myself and have sabr in that as well. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Again, we could have, if we wanted to, on this session alone, we could have just gone through this dua of the Imam. I mean, I encourage you all to read it. Every single line the Imam is saying is giving us more information. Towards the end, again, Imam is saying, later on, he focuses on, Allah help me remove the dhulm that's within me as well. Right? Because we self-oppress too. So as we're praying against other oppressors, we pray against ourselves too. So there's a lot of beauty there. But again, we don't have too much time and I want to wrap this up. The last, of course, two Imams that we want to end with are the fifth and sixth Imam, alayhim wassalam. The normal principles that we think about for their lives are training and education, right? Ta'aleem and tarbiyah. There, we have to think about two different types. When Imam Baqir alayhi salam, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam are going and teaching the general public, that's what we normally think about, right? Oh, they're teaching Shias and Sunnis, right? So we're like education for everybody. So somebody may derive from that, hey, I need to go and teach other people about the Palestinian cause. All these arguments we hear about, Hamas and rocket fire and all this, I need to educate myself and educate others about how to respond to these things, to the general public. But we also have to remember that the fifth and sixth Imam it wasn't always just education towards the general public, but they had specific private classes as well with their Shias. Ashabul Sir, the ones who were entitled to the secrets. So the Imams engaged in open general training, and they also had secret training as well. And they were trying to get their Shias prepared for something else. So, as we said, one type of activism might be in, posting about things or educating yourself and others. It might be sticking to just your own close circle and educating them and having discussions with them. Sometimes when people think about sharing posts or educating people about Palestine, we think it has to go to everybody. Again, that's the social media trend. Maybe it just means that no, maybe just within my own circle of friends, that's where we have to have the discussion. Maybe I don't need to go and post this everywhere. Maybe that's not necessary. Right? So there's all these sort of different approaches. I just want to end by concluding, then we'll move on to the musibah, inshallah. Just concluded what we talked about tonight. What is Islamic activism? It's that we have our ideas, our philosophy, our method, and our approach all sourced in Islamic sources, not from secular sources, not from communist sources or empirical sources. That has to come from the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. That's what makes something Islamic. That's what makes it Islamic activism. So we have to make sure, and we should check within ourselves, if I'm deciding to, whatever it happens to be, if my type of activism, what I'm doing, is it sourced really in the Quran and Ahlul Bayt? Or is it something that I made up on my own? Second point we said was there may be different ways of accomplishing that. There doesn't seem to be one type of Islamic activism, which we saw through the lives of the Ahlul Bayt. They all engage in various different types of ways. So if it's based on time and place, each of us are dealing with different situations. That also means that maybe when somebody goes out to the Al-Quds protest or organizes another protest, we say, look, that's a wonderful approach. Maybe that's not for me, but it's good for you and I support you. Maybe somebody says, you know what, I don't want to go out there, but I want to post on social media for everybody. Okay, maybe that's good for you, maybe that's not good for me. I want to have a discussion among my own family. Maybe that's good for you, maybe that's not good for me. I want to just, not do anything for the outside world. I only want to make and focus on my dua and my own internal reflection and spiritual reformation. Based on, let's say, the du'as in Sahifa Sajadiyah. I want to make sure that I'm not oppressing myself so that I don't end up oppressing others as well. What we need to keep in mind is that since there's all these different approaches to Islamic activism, as we keep this in mind, we don't start judging others. As we are commemorating this destruction of Baqi, where the Al Saud twice destroyed Baqi, as we remember this razing and destruction, we all come together for that and we say, look, this was obviously an injustice and oppression. We all recognized and have recognized today that the Palestinians deserve our support. The last thing that you and I need to do is to start destroying one another. The last thing that you and I need to do is start to cut each other's different activist methods down. This internal conflict is not going to help anybody except for the oppressive side. They want to divide and conquer, but how is that going to help us? Instead, we can go and say, you know what? I understand, I'm interested in why you think your approach is best. I'm willing to listen. At the end of the day, we can say, you know what? If you believe that you have the Islamic reasoning for why that's the case, if you believe that's the best approach, alhamdulillah, I will make dua for you and support you in that cause. I have chosen a different path based on this Islamic research, so I hope you would make dua for me as well. If we can come together and do that, imagine how much more effect and how much more effective we would be in our real Islamic activism. Whether that means we are goal-oriented, method-oriented, whatever. As long as it's sourced in the Quran and Ahlul Bayt, and we are trying primarily to remove the dhulm within ourselves, and after that, then make a change in our own families, make a change in our communities, and then into the larger degree of the world and the ummah, then you'll see how much more successful we would be in these struggles. This is the model that's provided to us by the Quran through the Ahlul Bayt, alayhimu salatu wa salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When a Shia wants to gain support, when they want to be active, sometimes it means that we go out for a certain cause and we protest, we go to an embassy, we go to a rally. When we are looking to cause the spiritual activism or engage in spiritual activism for ourselves, most of us know that we need to go out somewhere. We need to engage in something physical. And for us as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, that means ziyarah. Now, slowly, things are opening back up in the various places where we go for ziyarah. When a person wants to engage in that spiritual reformation, there's no denying that going for the ziyarah of the A'imma, of Rasulullah, of all the Ma'asumeen, alayhimu salatu wasalam, can really cause that internal change in somebody. There's no denying that. Imagine when somebody goes to the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they want to be an activist like him. They want to learn from his example. When we go, we grab that darih. We shed tears, we make du'as, we wail and cry and complain. And we hope that we can live the example of Imam Hussein. And say, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I hope I can live the example like you. We go to the grave, we move up to the other side of Abu Fadl al-Abbas. We grab his darih. Say, Ya Abbas, I want to support my community, my brother, my family, my friends, my community, the ummah, like you supported Imam Hussein. I'm learning from your example. That's why I'm here. That's why I grab your darih like this. We go to the graves of the other ma'asumin. But then we go to the graves of Baqi. Our hearts wish there was something there to grab. We wish we'd be able to grab hold of the darih of Imam Hasan and say, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I want to follow your example. I want to lead in the same way you led. I want to be active in the same way you were. And I know that I don't have to grab this darih. I know that just by looking at you, it should cause a change in me. Just by looking, by the fact that there's these oppressors sitting outside with guns, not allowing me to fully express what's inside of my heart. Just because of this, my heart bleeds. My heart hurts. I wish there was something else that I can do, but I have to learn from your example. We turn to Imam Sajjad. We say, Ya Imam Sajjad, I wish that I can recite Du'asum Sahifa next to your grave as well. I wish I could lament and cry, and I wish I could express and give you my condolences for you having had to witness what happened to your family in Karbala. But you'll have to allow me to do that from a distance. We say to Imam Baqir and Imam Sadiq, we appreciate what you've done for the ummah by passing down all of these teachings. But we wish you could have done more. We wish you could have been actively fighting against the zalimeen of your time, but because you couldn't do that, and because maybe we as Shias are not supporting the Islamic cause like we should, we grieve and our hearts break as well. But the thing that we grieve for the most, we know we can't hold on to your darih, but at least we can look and we see that we know that you're buried over here. So when our hearts want to attach to you, we can look at you and we get some semblance of peace and tranquility and sukoon. But when we say we want to follow the example of your mother, Fatima, when we say that we want to go and turn to the example of Zahra, we say, where do we turn? Do we look at you in Baqi? Do we look next to your graves? Do we shed our tears this way? Do we turn our backs? Do we turn around to Rasulullah? Do we expect that Zahra is buried there? Do we turn to Imam Ali and say that maybe she is buried next to Imam Ali? Do we turn our hearts to Karbala and say, no, Zahra is waiting over there, and this is where our hearts connect? على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Us Hussein, Us Hussein, Us Hussein ibn Haydar pe lakho salam, lakho salam. Nabi ke nawase pe lakho salam, lakho salam. जिसको दोषे नबी पर बिठाया गया, जिसका जन्नत से जोड़ा मंगाया गया, जिसके भाई को जहर पिलाया गया, जिसको बैठे बिठाए सताया गया, उस हुसैन, उस हुसैन, उस हुसैन इब्न हैदर पे लाखों सलाम, लाखों सलाम. नबी के नवासे पे लाखों सलाम, लाखों सलाम. जिसको धोखे से कूफे बुलाया गया, جس کو تیروں سے چھلنی بنایا گیا، جس کو بے آب و دانہ رلایا گیا، جس کو کربل میں ہائے ستایا گیا، اس حسین، اس حسین، اس حسین ابن حیدر پہ لاکھوں سلام، لاکھوں سلام، نبی کے نواسے پہ لاکھوں سلام، لاکھوں سلام، جس کو سجدے میں ذبح کرایا گیا، جس کی گردن پہ خنجر چلایا گیا، جس کے نیزے پہ سر کو چرایا گیا، جس کے جسم کو پامال کرایا گیا، اس حسین، اس حسین، اس حسین ابن حیدر پہ لاکھوں سلام، لاکھوں سلام، نبی کے نواسے پہ لاکھوں سلام، لاکھوں سلام، جبکہ عابد کو قیدی بنایا گیا، جس کی بچی کو ہائے رلایا گیا، جس کے کانوں سے خوبی بہایا گیا، جس کے کنبے کو ہائے ستایا گیا، اس حسین، اس حسین، اس حسین ابن حیدر پہ لاکھوں سلام، لاکھوں سلام، نبی کے نواسے پہ لاکھوں سلام، لاکھوں سلام، سر دیا گر دیا سارا کنبہ دیا، سب کی قربانی کی مگر اف نہ کیا، دم نکلتے بھی سجدہ جو کرتا رہا، اپنے نانا کی امت کو بخشوا گیا، اس حسین، اس حسین، اس حسین ابن حیدر پہ لاکھوں سلام، لاکھوں سلام، نبی کے نواسے پہ لاکھوں سلام، لاکھوں سلام۔ سورۃ مبارکۃ الفاتحہ۔
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد، اللہم کلی ولیک الحجۃ ابن الحسن صلواتک علیہ وعلی آبائہ فی هذه الساعة وفی کل ساعة ولییا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودلیلا وعینا حتی تسکنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين۔ بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، السلام علیک یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیک یا امیر المؤمنین، السلام علیک یا فاطمة الزہرا، السلام علیک یا خدیجة الکبریٰ، السلام علیک یا حسن المجتبی، السلام علیک یا ابا عبد اللہ الحسین، وعلی ارواح التي حلت بفنائک، علیکم منی سلام اللہ ابدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذريتك، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة الحسن، عجل الله فرجه وسهل الله مخرجه وظهورك، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته۔
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد